You are listening to the audio portion of the QB Power Hour webinar series. The QB Power Hour is a free biweekly webinar series for accounting professionals presented by Michelle Long and Dan DeLong, who are very passionate about the industry, QuickBooks, and apps that integrate with QuickBooks. You can find out all the details about the webinar series at qbpowerhour.com. So without further ado, here's Michelle and Dan.
All right. Hi, Michelle. How are you?
Hey, Dan, I'm great. How are you doing? Hope you had a good
Fantastic.
Thanksgiving.
Yes, we hope everybody did have a great Thanksgiving. Matthew, always good to see you as well.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me back on. I'm excited to talk about sales tax. I really don't like it.
I don't believe you. Based on your conversation of what you said the last time about how you don't like sales tax, I don't think you're being truthful. We have a star-studded panel of folks from Avalara joining us here today, and if we could have those that are presenting from Avalara come off, put their camera on. We do have some others that are just helping with the Q&A and such. But our topic today is all about, like we talked last time about the setting up sales tax inside of QuickBooks Online. With Alicia did a great presentation. She has a great course on her website about setting up sales tax inside of QuickBooks Online. But as she mentioned at the end of that, it's the shallow end of the pool when it comes to some more complicated setup of sales tax. So we wanted to have our friends at Avalara joining us here today to talk about some of those situations when you're butting up against the top of what QuickBooks Online will do with regards to sales tax calculation and setup. So we wanted to have them come on and talk about some of those things that they can help with. Now, Matthew, last time you talked about the fact that you don't care for sales tax at all. and so I wanted to start and kind of frame the conversation about, as an accounting professional, when you have those engagements with your clients and there are things that you don't like to do, because I know Michelle hates payroll and taxes, right? Like, how do you frame that and set that expectation up with your clients so that, especially it's a core functionality of a business, of how to do things in sales tax is such a core functionality. How do you keep that separate?
It's a really difficult thing to try to get out of, is the best way I can say it. So usually when we're first meeting with a client, we're trying to figure out what services they need. And if they're going to have more complex sales tax, it's something we let them know right away, that we have referral partners that we would involve or bring in, that they would help handle the sales tax. When you start getting stuff that's really complicated and they're adding different products and services all the time, it just becomes so much extra work. And we explain to them it's not a part of the normal pricing, so it's an add-on is how we handle it. I have not been successful at really getting away from doing sales tax. We just try to find the best way to make it as easy as possible.
Michael Corleone and The Godfather, right? They keep pulling you back in.
Pretty much, yeah.
One of those things. Michelle, what do you suggest?
I was going to say one of the things about sales taxes is you don't know what you don't know. And that's why I love Avalara and Avataxes, because they made me realize, like, I always thought a Hershey bar is a Hershey bar is a Hershey bar until they educated me that a Hershey bar with almonds is food and it's taxed one way, and a Hershey bar without almonds is taxed a different way. I had no idea. Same thing with things like toothpaste. Does it have fluoride or does it not have fluoride? They're taxed different. Who knew? And that's where I realized, oh my God, you can have three houses together and the middle house is taxed differently than the houses next door to them. I had no idea. And that's where, with having Avalara be on previously, and that's why when I saw them at the conference, I think it was last year, or at Scaling New Heights or something, I said, we need to have you all back on again, because this is an area of so much vulnerability, because if you get it wrong, the penalties and interest can cost a lot. And again, there's so much that you don't know, and it's getting more complex than ever with the economic nexus and everything. And this is an area I think we need help in, because a lot of us don't specialize in sales tax. And it's easy with everybody doing online sales now to get yourself in trouble. And so I'm very glad to have him back on today to help us learn more about what we don't know. And I like to just outsource this stuff to somebody smarter than me, because I don't want to know it, because I don't like taxes. So I would rather just have somebody else be responsible, because there's too many details and too much stuff.
Absolutely. So I want to let's go around the horn here and introduce the panel from Avalara. So I'm going to go from my right to left, or left to right, or bottom. I don't know who the Brady Bunch Zoom session that we have here. But Chris, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of say what your specialty is over at Avalara.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did, so funny enough, Dan and Michelle, we did a trivia at our booth, and Michelle, I think you would have won the sales tax trivia with that intro there. That was the candy bars and the toothpaste and everything. But my name's Christopher. I have been with Avalara since 2014. Care to venture, I've probably forgotten more about sales tax than I ever thought I would know. And my specialty is Dan, Michelle, Matthew, you folks on the call today. I lead a QuickBooks team that we sell almost exclusively to companies using QuickBooks. Hopefully that will suffice, Dan.
Yes, it will. It will. And Christina?
Hi, everyone. I am a strategic partner manager at Avalara, focusing on our point of sale partners mostly, but I came from the Davo side of Avalara, Davo by Avalara, and I've been with Avalara since January 2022, so almost 3 years. And I actually was a franchise owner myself for 12 years, and I can't express to you how much I wish Davo existed for my business back then. I hated filing sales tax, and I remember a couple of times choosing to pay it late so that I could leverage those sales tax dollars for my own. And that is definitely a bad habit for business owners. So I'm very passionate about Avatax, Avalara, and Davo by Avalara. And thank you for letting me be here today.
Awesome. And then Beth?
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Beth, and I am with Davo by Avalara, one of the products, and I handle all of the compliance for Davo merchants. Davo does integrate with QuickBooks Online for people using it as a POS system. So we have a direct integration. And then I also have been helping out lately with all the other inbound customer support and merchant-facing areas for Davo.
And before we get to Heather here, I'm going to launch the first poll, because yes, there is CPE for this session. Our friends at Maker are helping out with that, so we want to be able to prove that you were here, and the poll questions are a way that the way that you can do that. So Heather, a late entry into the Brady Bunch here. What do you do over at Avalara?
Hi, so nice to see everyone, and thank you guys for attending. My name's Heather Lopez. I'm out of Seattle, and I'm with Avalara, and I actually am on the Avalara for Accountants channel. So my role here is to support on how and manage how we work with our accounting partners. I've been with Avalara for 4 years now. I actually first started in our strategic initiatives group, so I was more focused on excise side of things. And so we recently launched the Avalara for Accounts channel, which I transitioned to a little over 2 years ago to help launch this channel, and as we grow our relationships with our partners.
Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. So as you might have guessed, we're going to try to keep this conversational as opposed to being presentational as we have done in the past, because there's just so much to know and to talk about with regards to sales tax in general. So we're going to dovetail off of our last webinar where Alicia talked about the setting up QuickBooks Online sales tax, and then where you're pushing the envelope of things that you might want to do. And I think David over at Davo, David Joseph, who created Davo, said it best, I think, when he was on prior webinars with us, that there's no value to doing sales tax to a business owner, right? It's a compliance thing. They have to do it, but there really is no value. And I'm always remember my experience with the Arizona Department of Revenue. Not that I had a direct integration with that, but I had a friend who worked at the Arizona Department of Revenue, and they managed the collection of sales tax as well as the income tax in the local Tucson office. And it was like clockwork, where they would always have someone come in and say, I can't afford to pay sales tax. And then, of course, their question to them is, what are you doing spending the state's money? And that kind of leads into this whole thing about how business owners perceive sales tax, as it, from an accounting perspective, everybody probably on the call is, of course, you don't do that, but they're looking at the money in the bank and spending based off of what's in the bank, and not realizing that some of that should be earmarked or separated or segregated from the regular cash flow activities that they are normally doing. They can certainly get themselves into trouble with payroll liabilities as well, but sales tax in an accounting speak is a liability that they'll have to pay. They're beholding that on behalf of the state. And so, Christine, I wanted to ask you how that kind of how that's solved by something like Davo, because of how it actually works between saving the company from themselves with regards to sales tax.
Sure, absolutely. Let's face it, managing sales tax is doing a job for free for the state. You don't get paid to do it. It's basically you're risk averse. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen, not to be over presentation like, but just so we have the visual learners as well as the auditory learners covered. But when you think about it, and can everyone see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, beautiful. I think we all know the problem is that the sales tax dollars they commingle with the business working capital. And because they're mingled, people, they can spend it. Payroll can come up on the same day that your sales tax is due. And Davo helps this by moving the cash dollars out daily. And because if you don't do that and you miss it, you're looking at anywhere between 20 and 30% in penalties and late fees for your customers. And that's awful. So what Davo will do is it'll go into QuickBooks and it will pull down the previous day's sales and sales tax transactions. Now, there is a stipulation in QuickBooks that you have to be using it for your invoices, and you have to have the status of paid for the invoice, and payment status has to be closed. Otherwise, Davo will not see it yet. But we'll go in and look at QuickBooks from the previous day, pull down those sales tax dollars and take them out so they're not commingling. And then Davo has the sales tax dollars to go ahead and file and pay on time, guaranteed. And we do look for the proper sales taxability to be correct in QuickBooks, of course. And this is really great for $54.99 per month. I will tell you that effective February 1st, that price will be moving to $57.99 or $58 almost. And it gives you a lot. You get support for all of that. But also to keep in mind, for when you file and pay on time, you do get a rebate in over more than half the states in the US. And this is important because it can make Davo either free or substantially discounted. And so those are really the main nuggets really is why spend A, your time on it, B, you're doing a free job for the state. And just like Dan said, it's not going to give you more inventory. It's not going to give you more employees. And there's no value to you except for not wanting to pay late fees. I'll stop sharing just so we can keep this conversational.
And what I really like about, because when we had Alicia on last time about if you set up QuickBooks Online with regards to collecting the sales tax properly, this is a great add-on or addition to it, because that's really where Davo excels, right? Is if you're setting it up properly, then Davo will intercede by impounding the liability so that it doesn't show on their money that's available to spend. And then everything that happens after the sales tax collection is then automated, right? Is that really a nutshell of what how Davo works in this situation?
It is. It's mostly automated, but we do have, Beth could attest to, we do have professional filers on staff. And that's another reason why your customers can feel great relief and trust in giving that task to Davo, because you can know that it's going to be done properly and that we understand it as well as on time. So it's really, yes, we do a great job of moving the sales tax dollars out so we don't get you in trouble and keep you out of that risk. And you have a truer sense of the value and profitability of your business. And it's certainly at least looking at your checking account to that extent, but also it's going to be done right. Yes.
Real quick, there's a question inside the chat, which I just wanted to draw attention to. They were asking, the pricing that showed was the $55 per location. Just for a bit of clarification, I believe that's discussing either per state is that you have to do filing in. Is that correct, or what do you mean?
That is per location. So if you have 4 restaurants, for example, or 4 retail locations, then it is per location per month. Yes. And that covers up to 3 filings. And it's funny too, when you talk about sales tax, a lot of business owners don't realize that if they leave their business and they owe sales tax, that it follows them personally. So it's a really good tidbit too, to help them keep that risk away from their financial livelihood.
So I just wanted to clarify, we talk about if it's set up properly and stuff. So do you all do that? And we talked about the Hershey bar and the toothpaste. How is that something that you all make sure it is set up properly?
Davo does not do that. We are a service that we trust it's correct in QuickBooks. So
how do we as the accounting professional get help with that? Don't you all have a service that helps us with that as well?
That's going to be the Avalara side, I believe. Not the Davo is the sort of you have all of the merchant journey that they go through. And part of that journey is setting up their business properly with the proper tax codes and categories, right? And Davo comes later. So the Davo that we're just talking about now, that's really that, hey, let's finish that last step so you don't have to ever be late and know that it's done right based on what we're seeing. So that would be before that journey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would that be more of a Heather question or a Chris question?
That is a great question.
Yeah, pick your poison, right? I can start, and then Heather can certainly add some color. Yeah, so as far as that initial setup goes, we do have implementation specialists and we do have customer support. And I have a few screens pulled up. I think this was particularly discussing tax codes. Is that fair?
Yeah. How do I know that I've set up my sales tax correctly inside of QuickBooks? Because as we talked about last time, it lists all of the categories, but how do I know I'm choosing the right one? And I think you guys have a pretty good resource to help with that. Of course, it's focused on setting this up inside of Avalara or Avatax as your flagship tax calculation product, but it would still be available, or they would be able to help help determine what these sales tax categories or classifications are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we could take this a couple different ways. The first place I'll show you is this is a publicly facing resource here, and it's our Avalara tax codes. And so I'll just type in shipping, because any company that sells products, they're going to have to ship. And we have different definitions of the types of shipping. So you can come in, you find the one that most closely relates to your business. Typically, this FR is what's most frequently used. And then you'll associate that with the shipping line item. And what I'm gonna do here is I'll just for fun, we'll build a tax matrix just so you can see.
Normally, you don't say fun and sales tax in the same sentence, but
Yeah, I'm really doing this for Michelle. So next time she sees this, she can brag about, hey, how is shipping taxed differently? So we have all the U.S. Armed Forces, but you'll see that shipping is taxed very differently across the country. Most of it's going to be taxable, but then there's also a number of states where it's tax exempt. And this is, to Michelle's point about fluoride and almonds and all that, it's almost impossible to keep up with all of this, right? Like, how would one business know, hey, I'm selling to Michigan and Minnesota, the Minnesota stuff, the shipping is going to be taxable. The Michigan stuff, the shipping is going to be tax exempt.
I'm quickly remembering my pain points from the last one. Why this becomes somewhat challenging. With this example and keeping us on topic of the question, in the past, I worked with a precious metals company, and we helped them actually set up Avalara for a full website, like API wise. And during the process, I learned if you sell more than $1,500 worth of precious metals at one time, they're non-taxable. If it's less than $1,500, it is taxable. So in that kind of a scenario, I think this is where trying to determine whether it's a Davo or an Avatax, as your liability increases for that stuff, it makes more sense to be stepping up to the higher platform where you can really map each individual item and have those special rules. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a more precious metals, it's an industry we run into, but I think something that might be a little more applicable would be clothing and apparel, because there's a couple states that have taxability thresholds for clothing and apparel, and they're right around the $100 mark. So if you're selling into the state of New York and you're over $110, that clothing and apparel is going to be taxable. If somehow you're finding clothes from New York that are less than $110, you're going to get those tax exempt. So
Heather or Chris, if I think one of the aha moments that I had when orbiting the booth around Avalara at some of the conferences and not necessarily wanting to, well, do I want to step into this whole nature of sales tax? Could you set the stage? Because one of the webinars that we had you guys on was where you just laid out the framework of the suite of services that you guys offer. Because I think a lot of folks in the accounting community are timid to cross into that threshold of, okay, what am I getting myself into by interfacing with Avalara? But there are pick and choose your own adventure types of ways to work with. And we just talked about that with Christine about you could just do Davo, and that if I'm comfortable setting it up properly and I have that confidence that I have done that, I can just add on this Davo add-on to QuickBooks Online to pretty much do the crockpot method of sales tax, where I put all my ingredients in and then everything else is then handled for me. What other, let's talk about that, about what other suites and services or services that you guys offer, because I saw in the chat Do you guys offer sales tax certificates and things like that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
great point,
Uh,
Dan. There we go. This is it. We can, so what's nice is that there's so many different ways that you can work with Avalara, and we've been around for so long, 20 years now. And anytime someone sees orange, they usually associate with either sales tax or yes, it's Avalara. And so we try to make sales tax fun as possible. And what's nice is that we actually created an entire channel dedicated for our accounting partners 4 years ago. So still relatively new. And to Avalara and how we work with accounting partners, there's actually 3 different ways. And Chris, if we could go ahead and look at that slide, 3 different ways we can work with our accounting partners. If we can, I think it's the one or 2 before this. Oh, I'm a visual person, so it's just easier for us, everyone, to see how we work with our partners here. And so traditionally, oh, go ahead, Matthew.
I was just going to say, as he was pulling it up, there was a question, unless it'll throw you off a bit, of maybe at some point touching base on if you're using a Stripe or a Square for certain things. If you have different channels and different ways tax has to be collected and then reported, how that comes into play with this as well.
Yep. We can definitely get into that here. Let's go ahead and bring it up here. That gives great point. So here is the different ways that we work with our accounting partners. Traditionally, how we've always worked with our accounting partners and how we still do is through this first motion here, which is our referral motion. And so if your client has a need, maybe they need to collect exemption certificate managements or automate that process. Maybe they have an issue with they're doing some kind of communication or excise tax of some sort. You can refer that over to Avalara, and either we actually redid this entire program this year, and which is an awesome about this program is traditionally, if you refer something over to us, it's a great way to add a revenue stream to your firm. You can earn commissions on anything you refer over to us, or you can pass on automatic discounts. Within that referral program, there's marketing materials if you want to work closer with us. There's different levels and way you can work with us. The more we work together, think of it as an airline program. The more you fly, the more points you get. The more you work together with us and us helping your clients, the higher incentives you can earn. So there's an entire package with our partner program, and it's totally free to join. So if your clients have some kind of sales tax, or if they're selling online, or if they're selling, or however they're transacting, they're most likely going to come up with sales tax. It's a great way to work with us in our partner program, and it's free to join. Now, the next motion here is this implement motion. And so you can actually become certified to implement Avalara solutions for your clients. Now, if you're a client, sales taxes can be very difficult to navigate. And so that's also another area or another opportunity for you to make additional revenue at your clients. Instead of Avalara doing the onboarding, that'd be an opportunity for you to do the onboarding for your client. So you can become certified to do that. I think that was maybe one of the questions here. And then the last motion here is the tools motion. So what tools can Avalara provide you as an accounting partner to maybe do some of these functions? Maybe you're not a sales tax expert, but your clients come to you often asking to help with returns maybe. And so we also have built a tool. It's actually the same tool that we use internally to file returns on behalf of our clients. We file over 7 million a year. We actually are the largest sales and use tax filer in the US. Same tool that we use to file our returns, we put a user interface on it specifically for our accounting partners. That way you can file returns for your clients by leveraging Avalara's team.
So it's not just one size fits all when it comes to how you can work with Avalara. And I see a lot of questions coming in. Does it work with Stripe, or does it work with this? That's another option. But when it comes to QuickBooks Online, Chris, I think maybe you would be the best person to answer this about what is AvaTax and how does that differ from Avalara in general?
Yeah, oh, that's a fantastic question. So what AvaTax is, that's our flagship product. So that is our sales tax calculation engine. With that, we're able to do a couple of really cool things. The first part is we validate your address. So when that comes through, we're going to do an address validation. That helps with bad shipping charges or anything like that. I don't know if anyone's ever ran into those, but I did work for a TMS company, and part of our discovery was, hey, do you use Avalara? Because they wanted to know if your shipping address was going to be correct. So that's one piece. Then what we do is we actually drill down into the latitude and longitude. So when Michelle was saying next door neighbors having different tax rates, it's a true thing. Shopping malls can potentially, we have a couple of examples of shopping malls that have different tax rates. So we drill into that. So we find the correct jurisdictions, and then we find what those tax rates are. And we look for any special sourcing rules. Some states are origin, some states are destination, some states are a hybrid. And then we make that tax determination and pass it back to your business system. And yeah, go ahead.
Now, when things get complicated, which is a great use case for Avalara, when they're selling online and they're using Stripe or Square or some other kind of point of sale system, and QuickBooks is somewhat involved in the whole situation, I think it's important to understand what AvaTax would interface with, or can it interface with all of them and just be that single source of truth for sales tax? So like the example of, hey, I'm doing some sales inside of QuickBooks Online, and I also have an e-commerce channel that I might need to collect sales tax on, but that data is not coming into QuickBooks in a format that will utilize the sales tax engine inside of QuickBooks. Where would that best be? How would that work with that type of situation?
Yeah. So Dan, that's a really cool question. Just because the way that Avalara was built, we were built on these partnerships, and we have over 1,400 different business systems that trust Avalara to integrate into and be part of their system. So when you have, and I'm just using this as an example, partially because you and partially because of Susan in the chat. So you have a company that's using a Shopify or that's using a QuoteWorks or a Jobber, and you have QuickBooks on the back end. Avalara has the ability to integrate into all of these platforms, kind of like a wheel with spokes. So Avalara is going to be that centralized point of truth. And then we have these pre-built integrations into all these different platforms so that you have your centralized point of tax truth. And then we can ping out and send those tax determinations to whatever business system you need.
And then if you don't want to integrate them directly, you can also just import those transactions into AvaTax to make sure that it's calculated properly, right?
Yep, absolutely.
While we're talking about these complex kind of things or whatever, we did have somebody that asked, can we connect AvaTax for a company that invoices in QBE inside RightWorks? So in a hosting
The
environment.
enterprise.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay,
Enterprise is what it works with.
That was, I think I heard your question, and I don't know what happened. I keep getting keep getting booted out of here. Yeah, so we have a great partnership with RightWorks. They're one of our larger QuickBooks partners, and we have an integration for QuickBooks Enterprise. So we have that configuration is no, that configuration is quite common for us.
Just in general, like, how does AvaTax interface with these integrations? Does it sit in between the sales and the collection of the sales tax? And then what does it do as far as if you were to use this with QBO to make sure, say you don't trust QuickBooks Online. I don't know why you would do that. Never, it always works. But if you have some of these complicated setups and you are integrating with Avatax with QuickBooks Online, I hate to use the word seamless integration, but that is the term that people will use. How does that work when you're integrating with some of these, with something that is the sales and then calculating the sales tax?
Yeah. I'll do my best to not use that word, Dan. But we are integrated in a way that looks and acts just standard functionality. So go ahead, Matt. I saw you come off mute.
I think the key to this, right, workflow wise, would be you want your Avatax, your Avalara program to integrate directly to whatever third-party application that's going to be responsible for creating the invoicing and this figuring out the sales tax there. That way, whatever it's going to calculate appropriately there, and then their sync of that third-party app, which goes to QuickBooks Online, would be pushing into QBO the correct amount, the invoice with the proper sales tax amount, because the Avalara product would be handling that calculation based on whatever third-party app that you're doing it with. And then if it also would connect to QuickBooks Online if you do your sales from there for those ones, to then combine everything together to give you single reporting with totals for everything.
Yeah. You seem like you've done this before.
A couple times.
So I launched the second poll questions because I realized we're just chatting away and we're not taking the poll questions, and those that need CPE, we need to do that. Prior to this webinar, this is the question: what did you think Avalara specialized in? This is a multi-choice question, because as we're discovering, Avalara does more than what we had thought. Like even the 1099 processing is something that you guys can handle. Is that more of a question for Heather or Chris or both?
I'd say Heather is much more familiar with the 1099 process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
So we acquired a company called Track 1099. I think it's about 2 years ago now, to now offer a way to automate and streamline the 1099 collection and filing process. Additionally, we can collect W-9s all year round. And also it's a very easy way to gain consent for electronic delivery instead of mail, because I know that's a huge thing, trying to reduce mailing costs, as postage went up to almost 90 cents this year. If you're trying to reduce that is a great way to handle that. And so you can either, for accounting partners that are maybe filing 1099s on behalf of their client, very easy way to streamline and automate that process, as we can do all the e-filing, state filings, mail, and the W-9s. Or if you have a client that maybe handles it on their own, they can also sign up with us directly for account to also streamline and automate that process. And then 1099 season is coming up. Before you know it, it'll be January and it's crunch time. If you haven't already, definitely check us out. It's still Track 1099, but now it's going to be rebranded to Avalara 1099, but our website is track1099.com.
And there will be orange somewhere included in there, I'm sure.
Lucky guess.
Question that popped up there as soon as you started talking about 1099s. Can you do amended 1099s with Track 1099?
So we can do correct to 1099. It's free to do. As long as the 1099 was originally filed in Track 1099, we can file the correction. So say if you're using a different provider before and started using Track 1099, you wouldn't be able to file the corrected form if it was done outside a different software before. It's a great question.
All right. So who wants to talk about Nexus tracking?
Yeah.
because you have a really cool thing. Like we talked about it last week about inside of QuickBooks Online, you do have this economic nexus tracking ability, but it's more of a report and that sort of thing. Are you able to demonstrate what it looks like and how the economic nexus tracking works in Avatax?
Dan, I sure hope so. But we'll see. Every time I've gotten called on, I got kicked out.
Okay,
So,
we'll try to hold on to you here.
so what I'm showing right here, this is the home screen for an Avalara account. So the first thing you're going to see when you log in, or at least I see, my eyes go to this map over here on the right. And what this is showing is this is essentially showing you a snapshot of where you or your client has created economic nexus. So when I click into the details, you can see that we have a number of states that are orange. And if you look over here, you'll see your sales threshold. So these are the states where the thresholds have been met. It shows your threshold as well as what your sales were. And it lets you know that you've crossed that threshold and it's time to get registered.
And then that is a service that Avalara can handle as well. Okay, now that I've crossed that threshold, now what? I can lean into Avalara to be able to set that up properly, right?
Yeah. And yeah, that's perfect because we have an ability to do that right here from the screen. It will take you to where you can buy registrations right here online, or a lot of the accounting firms that we're working with or ProAdvisors that we're working with will do those registrations. And then it's very simple. You'll check the box for the new state once you're registered. So it's just a checkbox of all the different states. And then something else, Dan, that Avalara offers is a sales tax risk assessment. And this is something that we always recommend when we're first talking with businesses, especially businesses that have been established for a little while. And we find out for some reason or another, tax wasn't collected properly. Hey, let's do a risk analysis and take a look back and see if you've created a lot of uncollected liability.
So I want to get a little nerdy on one part of the calculation of the sales tax. When you have companies that if you're buying and you're paying sales tax on certain products, interior design is what I think of right off the bat. They're buying this stuff, they've already paid the sales tax. So now within their calculations, they need to reduce the amount of sales tax that they're actually liable for. So it starts becoming tracking the expenses on the tax on the expense side. Is there a way within Avalara to handle that? Or is there a form where we can add that number in to make sure the tax is correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's I think where you're going, Matt, is that sometimes there's sales and use. And yeah, that's absolutely something we can do. We are currently working on an integration into the AP side with Intuit. But right now it's a manual upload. And what you'll do is you'll just upload those purchases into Avalara. It's an Excel sheet, an Excel file. You just throw your purchases in or your services, and then we can take whatever tax you populated, or we can just calculate that use tax on your behalf.
So Chris, I had a question for something you said right before Matt's question. You said the risk assessment, you can help to determine something back liability for, basically they had sales where they didn't charge sales taxes. So there's liability where they didn't collect it, but they may have that liability if they get caught or audited or whatever. Do we as the client recommend they go back and file amended and fess up to, oh, wait, we did it wrong, and pay it out of their own pocket? Or do you help advise when you do that risk assessment, or when we come and say, hey, this client has been doing it wrong? How do you help us to decide what's the right course of action in that? Do you help in that determination after you do that risk assessment and stuff?
Yeah. Michelle, I will give you the proper answer, and then I will
give me a
tell
good
you,
story.
and then I will
There's
tell you,
gotta
yeah,
be
then I'll tell you
stories.
what I tell the companies that I work with. We always initially, the right thing to do is you should come clean, but that's not always going to make the most sense for the companies. So just for example, we'll just use this Alaska example. They're going to have about $284,000 worth of sales that they did not collect sales tax on. Right? If we take the national, I'm just going to use round numbers. So 10% sales tax plus 25% penalties and interest. They're going to somewhere in the ballpark of $45,000 in uncollected tax and penalties if they were to get caught. Michelle, if you were to get caught with 45,000, would that be a big detriment to your business?
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so that's the conversations that we have. And then we have special agreements with the various states where we can limit that liability look back period so that, hey, maybe you don't owe tax for the last 7 or 8 years. Maybe you only owe tax for the last 4 years or the last 3 years. So we can limit that historical liability. And then we also have an agreement for penalty abatement as well. So we have that 25, I think Christine said 25 to 30% penalty. It varies state by state, but we have agreements with the state to help with that penalty abatement as well.
Okay, great.
Now, I guess the biggest thing that I want to make sure that people understand, especially when it comes to something like Davo and Avatax, you guys, Avatax or Avalara has its own filing and remitting service. That's part of Avatax, and then there's Davo that has a filing and remitting service. Where's the line between the two? If you're working with Avatax or Avalara in that capacity, do you go with Davo or do you go with the file and remittance
I can
service
probably,
through Avatax?
yeah, I can probably speak to a little bit of that. Davo is meant to be completely automated. There is no, you get to review the returns and then they're done. We will automatically take care of it. And if you are looking for reviewing the process, and we cover up to 3 filings, I don't know if someone from the Avalara returns would like, for managed services would like to, or MRA would like to address that more deeply on their side.
So I think where we see Davo as a great play is if you have a physical location, like a restaurant or a retail shop, you have the POS platforms. That's where we see Davo as a fantastic fit. And Christine, feel free to jump in if I'm misspeaking. But that's typically, you have a physical location, and that's about the extent of your business. Is that fair?
It really depends. If everything is tracked, for example, if we were to use Lightspeed as an example, if someone is doing some e-commerce and it's actually properly represented with the correct tax category and description in that, then Davo has no problem doing that. They just have to set up their tax profiles. However, traditionally, I would agree with you, Chris. I think it's really point of sales. A lot of them are not doing e-com still. Like Square doesn't have a lot of e-com. They integrate with other e-com. So I would say far and wide, Avalara is really core competence and fantastic at taking care of your e-commerce customers for sure.
Yeah.
Could I just add that I would, especially for the clientele perspective, that Davo is definitely, if we're able to work with your clients that need the cash management aspect of our service, and coming from a lot of small businesses, coming up with the funds to pay just on a monthly basis can be hard because, as Christine mentioned at the beginning, that's just in a lot of people's same bank account, and they're using it as capital towards buying the broken refrigerator that they need to replace. So the fact that Davo is able to set those funds aside daily and then pay from our bank account, so that is really the headache that's gone. So I would say cash management is really the top, the daily cash management for those clients that need it, those merchants that definitely spend the sales tax before it's due.
Which definitely segues into tend to be a localized business, and you've got a high number of transactions. They might be low in value, but if you've got a lot of transactions, people don't realize how much sales tax they start to collect. So it's a great point, Beth. Thank you.
Yeah, I had a used car dealership. I was doing all their sales tax for them, and it was the biggest pain in the rear. Their monthly sales tax was $30,000 a month, and you'd have to report to different states at different times because of where the person actually lived. So what I believe I'm hearing, if I was to summarize this whole scenario, if you start off with QuickBooks Online and their sales tax setup onto it, as long as you've got everything set up appropriately within there, the product, services, everything else, which is fundamental to be able to use a Davo anyways, right? You need all that stuff set up. Their thing can give you the numbers, but they're not doing any of the filing for you. You're taking that and you still have to go and do all the filing. You have to actually register for different Nexus, for different places, everything else, where Davo becomes an automated, advanced, improved version of this. You can use, especially with point of sale systems. So it's tracking everything, still reporting back to QBO. So your books are correct. But thanks to Davo, Davo's going to do the filing in the different places that needs to be done. And then Avalara, as you step up above, become the more complicated sales tax requirements where maybe you have different sales channels. You need to be able to combine things in all uniquely, or there's unique scenarios. Like I said about the precious metals or different things of that nature, you can fully customize it, make it extremely unique, and still get the reporting back into QuickBooks, but get the full calculation from the different places all into one. Is that kind of the tiered approach in a sense?
I think that's fair. I think so. Avalara typically comes in if you're not selling POS. So if you have additional channels outside of a point of sale system. So e-commerce is big, software, trying to think, medical devices comes up, dietary supplements, health supplements, things like that are pretty complex state by state, right? Those things.
Can you speak a little bit, Chris, about the differences between QBO sales tax and AvaTax, on how a little bit more granular AvaTax might be helpful, the calculation aspect of that?
Yeah. And I tried to touch on it a little bit earlier. One of the big things is going to be that initial. So we do that latitude and longitude assignment. So we have that address validation. We're going to actually look at the exact pinpoint on the map, because there's going to be some instances where you can have 7, 8, 9 different tax jurisdictions that you're tracking for a single location on a map. And that's just not possible through zip codes. The other piece is going to be around the tax codes and product taxability. So if you're selling anything other than just stuff, they call it tangible personal property in the tax world. I use the scientific term of stuff. So if you're selling more than just stuff on Amazon, it probably makes sense to look at an Avalara. And then there's certain states, and we like to say if you're selling in more than 3 states, or you've created that nexus in more than 3 states, it's probably a good idea to start to look at automation, because that's when that time to value play really comes in.
That makes sense. I had a question. Did anybody, Matthew or Michelle, did you see any that flashed by?
We had a couple of questions from Bill. The Nexus tracking that we talked about earlier, that is sales tax only, not income tax. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I wanted to make...
The various departments inside of the state do talk to each other, though.
Okay.
So if you have triggered income tax Nexus in a state and you're not paying sales tax in a state, there's a good chance that you could be getting a letter from that state.
Okay. And then another one, before when we talked about if they have the uncollected sales tax and that you're negotiating 3 or 4 years versus 7 years, are the voluntary disclosures done through a legal team so those conversations are protected pre-finalization?
They are. Yep. So we won't even disclose the business name or identifiable information until that's all been determined. And it all hinges on just as long as the state hasn't reached out once the name has been disclosed. But yeah, we do. I think last year we did over 2,000 voluntary disclosure agreements throughout the various states, and that number just continues to rise.
And one more question that's pertinent to us accounting professionals. In some states, if I remember correctly, Ohio might have been one, if we bundle our services along with apps, let's say we've got Davo and QBO, and we're bundling these apps so that our services are $2,000 a month, which includes the apps.
Mm-hmm.
So if we bundle our services and apps together, that could trigger sales taxes on our services as well in some states, but not in all states. Is that true? And is that something, is there a chart or anything anywhere or resource anywhere where we can find out so we don't get ourselves in trouble as we now work with people in multiple states?
So that is a fantastic question. And Michelle, I'd love to have an opportunity to walk through this a little bit more, but we do have what we call it's Avalara Tax Research, and this is our tax research tool. And one of the things that we look at is within this tool, we have taxes of doing business, application of tax, all these different categories. And then we also are able to find specific tax laws. And I'm not going to jump into it because I just don't have enough time, but we do have that. And then to answer your question in a shorthand, the answer is yes. If you're selling bundled products or services, if some part of that is taxable, the state will tax the whole thing in certain states.
Okay. Because, yeah, I thought in Ohio, you had to invoice separately, your services on one invoice and the apps on another invoice to make sure you didn't do that. So be careful out there, people.
Yeah. And then also know for the accounting professionals on the call is we do have those services specific for accounting professionals as well.
Yeah, because it definitely could. I know that's a common answer or question. I'll just avoid sales tax altogether by just doing a bundle. That's not always the easiest answer because eventually they tend to find these things out. Like Chris alluded to, government agencies do talk to each other, especially when one gets triggered and another one is just sitting there twiddling their thumbs, waiting for you to file a return, whatever that might be.
And as the states are looking for more and more money, and sometimes sales taxes is a good area for them to go collect money and stuff too.
Yeah,
be
there's
careful.
a great story with David Joseph about how he discovered that he was due some taxes by an auditor just sitting there counting customers going in and out of his restaurant, right? That's not the kind of conversation that you want to have with the government agency in that regard. So I did ask the last question. Would you like to learn more about Avalara, because as we have determined, it's more than 1 hour is going to allot for us. You can reach out and talk to them about their suite of services. We appreciate everyone from the Avalara team joining us here today, even Jamie, as her voice boomed an answer.
I got very
So we
excited about RightWorks and QuickBooks Enterprise.
That's okay. So we appreciate all the orange folks joining us today, and we will see you next time on the QB Power Hour. And the CPE for today will be following up by the end of the week if you answered all of the full questions. So we appreciate you joining us today, and we'll see you next time on the QB Power Hour.
We hope you enjoyed listening to the QB Power Hour podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in our Facebook group. You can find those resources and much more at qbpowerhour.com.